Story 1. The Unseen Guest Beneath. In the sleepy suburban sprawl of a small American town, nestled within a high ranch-style home, 12-year-old Ethan enjoyed the privilege of the largest bedroom, a spacious sanctuary on the lower level. The house, with its split-entry design, separated the upstairs living quarters from the downstairs den, garage, and Ethan's room, which was both a blessing and a curse for the eldest child and only boy among two younger sisters. His room, with its cool air and ample space, was the envy of the household, especially after his parents upgraded him to a full-size bed at age 10, a rite of passage that marked his growing independence. But in the sweltering summer of his 12th year, something changed. For 3 consecutive nights, Ethan awoke abruptly in the dead of night, his heart pounding for no discernible reason. The steady hum of the fan beside his bed, a necessity in the oppressive heat, provided a comforting white noise that should have lulled him back to sleep. Yet sleep eluded him. At 12, he was too old for childish fears, too young to understand the creeping dread that began to settle in his bones. One fateful night, unable to shake the unease, Ethan rose to refill his glass of water from the bathroom just outside his room. As the faucet ran, a faint sound, something like a rustle or a muffled breath, came from his bedroom. He froze, shutting off the water, straining his ears. Nothing but the fan's drone. Cautiously, he stepped to his bedroom doorway, peering into the familiar shadows. Something was wrong. The air felt thick, charged with an inexplicable menace. His instincts screamed at him to flee, and he did, bolting upstairs to the living room, where he curled up on the couch, trying to convince himself it was nothing. Hours later, he woke again, this time to the unmistakable glow of the refrigerator light spilling from the kitchen. The clink of glass and the rustle of food being rummaged through echoed through the house. From the couch, he couldn't see the kitchen, but he heard footsteps retreating downstairs after the fridge door slammed shut. Drowsy and disoriented, he dismissed it as his imagination and drifted back to sleep. The next day, his mother, folding clothes in his room, wrinkled her nose and scolded him about a foul odor. "Ethan, this room smells awful. Clean it up," she insisted. He shrugged it off, unable to detect anything amiss. That night, with the air conditioning humming through the vents, Ethan played video games in his room, the earlier unease temporarily forgotten. After switching off the console, he rolled onto his side, ready for sleep. The absence of the fan left the room eerily quiet, save for the soft rush of air from the ceiling vent. Then he woke again. The vent fan stopped, plunging the room into silence. And in that silence, he heard it, a slow, deliberate breathing that wasn't his own. His blood ran cold. He scanned the room, his closet door firmly shut, ruling out that possibility. Could it be his younger sister playing a prank? Heart hammering, he slid to the floor and lifted the bedskirt, peering into the darkness beneath. What he saw would haunt him for years. A large, disheveled figure lay sprawled on a pile of blankets, their head turned toward him, eyes closed as if asleep. Ethan stumbled backward, screaming, his voice piercing the night. His parents' bedroom door flew open, and his father, a burly man not easily rattled, charged downstairs. Ethan could only point, stammering, "Under the bed!" His father yanked the intruder out, a gaunt, filthy man who reeked of neglect. As his mother dialed 911, Ethan's father forcibly escorted the stranger outside, his shouts echoing in the night. The police took the man away, but the questions lingered. How long had he been there? Days, perhaps, hiding beneath Ethan's bed, eating from their fridge, his presence the source of the mysterious smell in Ethan's sleepless nights. The violation left Ethan scarred, unable to sleep in his room for months. He took refuge between his parents, and his father installed security cameras around the house. They discarded everything in the fridge, fearing contamination. The fear of someone lurking beneath his bed became a specter that followed Ethan into adulthood, a reminder that safety ascended, even in the safety of home. True terror can hide in the shadows. Story 2. The Horror in the Woods. In the bitter winter of 1943, after the brutal but lesser-known Battle of Ilikiluki on the Eastern Front, Soviet soldier Ivan Petrovich, a young man from Yaroslavl, found himself in a rare moment of respite. The battle, though not as infamous as Stalingrad or Kursk, had been a grueling 2-month ordeal, leaving both Soviet and German forces battered and bloodied. Ivan, barely 20, had seen more death than most men could endure in a lifetime. Yet on this frigid evening, he and his comrades gathered in a miraculously intact village house, its walls shielding them from the hellish cold outside. The air was thick with the scent of vodka, cigarette smoke, and the raucous laughter of men desperate to forget the war, if only for a night. As the celebration reached its peak, two soldiers Ivan and his friend Sergei despised, boorish, loudmouthed braggarts, stumbled into the room, their presence souring the mood. Seeking escape, Sergei nudged Ivan. "Care for a smoke?" he asked, his breath visible in the chilly air. Ivan nodded, and they donned their heavy coats, stepping out into the biting cold. The night was still, the snow-laden trees absorbing all sound. They lit their cigarettes, the faint glow of the embers, a small comfort as they spoke of the battle's end and their hopes for survival. Their conversation was cut short by a blood-curdling scream from the distant woods. It wasn't the cry of an animal or the wind. It was human, raw with terror. Fearing a comrade was under attack, possibly by a vengeful German patrol, Ivan and Sergei rushed back inside, grabbing their rifles. They rallied a dozen others, their drunken bravado replaced by grim determination. The group plunged into the forest, the snow crunching under their boots, their breath forming clouds in the moonlight. As they ventured deeper, an oppressive dread settled over Ivan, a primal fear that went beyond the threat of enemy soldiers. The woods were too quiet, the air heavy with an unnatural stillness. The screams had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Ivan suggested they split into pairs to cover more ground, and he and Sergei set off together, their rifles at the ready. Minutes later, they heard it, a faint, anguished sobbing, like that of a wounded man. Following the sound, they noticed drops of blood staining the snow, bright and fresh against the white. Their grips tightened on their weapons, senses heightened. The sobbing grew louder, and then, in a small clearing, they found a scene that would haunt Ivan until his dying day. Two German soldiers lay before them. One was dead, his body a grotesque ruin, limbs torn away, skin shredded, his face unrecognizable, his uniform in tatters. His scalp was missing, and a strange chemical-like stench hung in the air, unlike the familiar rot of death. The other soldier, alive but barely, cowered against a tree, his leg mangled, his chest bloodied. He muttered frantically in German, his eyes wild with terror, oblivious to Ivan and Sergei's presence. Ivan approached the corpse, his stomach churning at the sight. Sergei moved toward the living soldier, who finally noticed him and recoiled, screaming incoherently. Ivan caught fragments of his word, something like "Das Koloss," repeated in a panicked mantra. Before Ivan could stop him, Sergei raised his pistol and fired a single shot, silencing the German forever. In that moment, a low, guttural moan echoed through the trees. Ivan's heart stopped as a towering, indistinct figure, far too large to be human, darted through the shadows, its movements unnaturally swift. Panicked, Ivan and Sergei fired blindly into the darkness, their shots ringing out in the night. The other soldiers converged on the clearing, but the thing was gone, leaving only the mangled bodies and a lingering sense of horror. Back at the village, their superiors reprimanded them for recklessness, but Ivan's report of the incident was sent to high command. No investigation followed. The war demanded focus on tangible enemies, not phantoms. Yet for Ivan, who would flee to America years later to escape the Soviet regime, the memory of that night remained the most terrifying of his life. The mutilated German, the chemical stench, and the fleeting glimpse of that monstrous figure became a nightmare he could never outrun, a reminder that some horrors defy explanation. Story 3: The Stranger in the Yard. When Jake and his fiancée, Morgan, moved into their charming, modest home in a quiet Midwestern town, they envisioned a peaceful life together. The house, with its cozy rooms and sprawling backyard, was perfect for the young couple, who dreamed of one day filling it with children. Their neighbors, an elderly couple in their late 60s, welcomed them warmly, their kindness easing the chaos of unpacking and furnishing their new home. The other neighbors were distant, Their house is separated by wide wooded lots, giving the area a serene, almost isolated feel. 2 weeks into their move, exhaustion had become a constant companion. Between their demanding jobs and the endless task of setting up the house, Jake and Morgan collapsed into bed each night, drained but hopeful. One evening, as Morgan stirred a pot of pasta in the kitchen, Jake sat at the table, browsing online for area rugs. The house felt stifling, the air thick with the day's heat. Deciding to let in a breeze, Jake approached the sliding glass door leading to the backyard. What he saw froze him in place. In the dim glow of the interior lights, a man sat in one of their patio chairs, his broad shoulders hunched, his head bowed. He was larger than Jake, and his presence in their private sanctuary sent a jolt of fear through him. Heart racing, Jake whispered, "Morgan, don't scream, but there's a man in the yard." Morgan tiptoed over, her gaze sharp as she peered through the glass. She clung to Jake, torn between urging him to confront the stranger and begging him to stay safe. Jake hesitated, his own fear clashing with his instinct to protect Morgan. The man hadn't moved, but the fact that he was there, in their backyard under the cover of darkness, suggested he knew they were home. Summoning his courage, Jake rapped on the glass and shouted, "Hey, you need to get off our property!" The man turned, his face illuminated by the light. He was older, perhaps 50, with a long, gray beard and tattoos snaking down his arms. A chilling half-smile curled his lips, as if he found Jake's demand amusing. He rose, his size even more imposing, and sauntered toward the door. Jake checked the lock, his pulse pounding. The man stopped inches from the glass, his gaze shifting to Morgan. His expression darkened, and he began muttering vile, explicit threats, his tongue flicking across his lips. Jake's anger flared. "I'm calling the police," he roared, slamming the blinds shut to block the man's leering face. He dialed 911, his voice shaking as he relayed the situation. The operator kept him on the line, and Jake pressed the phone to the glass, letting her hear the man's continued rant. Eventually, the threats stopped, and Jake risked a glance outside. The man was gone. When the police arrived, they searched the yard but found no trace of him. They took a report and left, assuring Jake and Morgan it was likely a one-time incident. But it wasn't. Later that night, as they watched TV in the living room, a faint noise came from the yard. Jake crept to the window, parting the blinds just enough to see. The man was back, a cigarette glowing in his hand, his muttering directed at the house. When he noticed the movement of the blinds, he charged the window, pounding on the glass and screaming depraved threats about Morgan. Jake sent Morgan upstairs, shielding her from the verbal assault. "I'm calling the police again," he yelled, hoping to scare the man off. The pounding stopped, and when Jake checked, the man had vanished once more. He joined Morgan upstairs, comforting her as she trembled, but their relief was short-lived. Soon they heard it, bumping and knocking at the back door, the doorknob rattling as someone tried to force their way inside. Jake grabbed the kitchen phone and called 911 again, pleading for immediate help. This time the police arrived swiftly, but the man had fled, likely disappearing into the dense trees beyond the yard. The next day, Jake and Morgan canvassed the neighborhood, introducing themselves and describing the intruder. What they learned was chilling. A few houses down recognized the description. The man was a local menace, known for abusing his ex-wife and battling drug and alcohol addiction. He lived just around the block in a dilapidated house, a fact that made Jake's blood run cold. They reported him to the police, but without video evidence, charges couldn't be pressed. The man never returned, but the fear lingered, a constant reminder of how close danger had come to their new beginning. Jake and Morgan installed security cameras and reinforced their locks, determined to reclaim the safety of their home. But the shadow of that night never fully faded.